This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
I'm Matthew Phillpott, as you probably guessed. I've been running these seminars last year and again this year, and this time I thought I'd actually start off by speaking myself. I've done quite a lot about blogs in the past, so I thought I'd do a kind of a beginner's guide to blogging, basically, or to writing blog posts. How many, first of all, of you have actually written blog posts, run a blog in the past?
I did do a couple of blogs, but they didn't work out. I
Worked
wasn't
out.
happy with them.
So it kind of fell apart and sort of died off. So I think sort of, excited, could you raise your hand again? Yeah, so almost everyone here has sort of done something on the blogs. Or successfully in most cases, or less successfully, less successfully.
Yeah. Just started yesterday.
Okay, so hard to tell. Yeah, okay. Okay, what I'm going to basically talk about then is, I'll talk for the first sort of half of this and then sort of just discuss and talk about it. So what makes for a good blog post, how you might construct a blog post, so the length of tone, subheadings and so forth. I've only just started your time. Structure of a blog post. I'll just cover those sort of grounds. So starting off, what makes for a good blog post? Well, basically, obviously, compelling and engaging content is what you're obviously always after for yourself as well as for the reader. So if you're reading a blog post, you want it to be engaging. So, and it needs to be consistent over a period of time. So you're looking at sort of publishing as regularly as you can, depending on the type of blog that you're running. How sort of often that will be, but just getting some kind of consistency there. So anyone that is reading it will get an idea of sort of the kind of blog that you're going to be. But at the end of the day, you all will have your own style, you all have it there for different reasons, so there is no right or wrong. And one of the things I do want to sort of make clear is I'm not going to tell you how to write a blog post and sort of say this must be how you actually do it. I'm just giving you sort of some ideas of how you might write it and how you might sort of try to gauge the audience a little bit more and how they will be reading your blog posts. So just keeping those sort of things in mind. So I don't want to say that everything I'd say today is what you should be doing. But you should definitely sort of be looking at sort of the ways that you can write blog posts to try to get maximum attention from the audience. Okay, so first of all, things to consider. Choosing your topic, the basics of writing any blog post really, is what you're actually going to be writing about. So define your topic and consider when you do that. I mean, that's sort of almost easy, you sort of find what your topic is going to be, but consider the limitations of that and what kind of length detail you're going to be going into for it. So just get a kind of rough idea of where you're going with this. If it's a research piece, you obviously don't want to go too in depth, but where's the right level? And you've got to consider that when you're starting off the post. Title is vital, basically, which didn't mean that too blind. Basically, that's what's going to draw your readers in. That's the first thing that anyone online will likely see of your blog post, whatever you'll do, however good or bad your post actually is. It's the title that will actually get them to start reading it in the first place. So, where possible, be catchy, a little bit descriptive so people know what they're likely to be reading about, but not too long at the same time. So that's not an easy thing to achieve, but trying to get as much of that as possible is quite vital. This is from a guide on writing blog posts from the internet, and it's largely for kind of commercial companies and sort of businesses who want to write posts, but these are various titles that you could use. So what to do with something about a complete guide to creative ways to do this and so forth. So it's just, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that every single blog post you write should have something on those sort of lines in the title, but it should very much, that's one way that you can do some blog posts, and it's something that you should consider how you frame your title. If it's too descriptive and boring, people might get turned off by it. At the same time, if you just go for flashy and catchy, people might not even know what you're talking about. So you do need to get the right level there. These are some examples from academia. So British Library has got the Journey of a Greek Manuscript, Happy St. Lawrence's Day, both of which give you some idea of the kind of content that you're going to get in, but not that much. So those are titles that maybe could do a little bit more fleshing out, but you would probably get a vague idea if you're interested in something. archives, Keeper's Gallery, the Treaty of Versailles, gives you kind of an idea of maybe what you're looking at there. Live Treaty of the First World War is probably a better title in many ways. That gives you a much better idea of the kind of content you're getting, at least the topic. From the SATS blog, new project on old books, some challenges. That one is not a bit more catchy, but I'm not sure if it does actually tell you exactly what you're necessarily after. So you don't necessarily know what it's going to mean. History and communication, again, a little bit sort of, it's descriptive but not necessarily telling you the full story. This one here, Belgium Pledge, Britain's moral trigger for entering the Great War, probably a bit more descriptive, maybe a little bit long. So. And then Mark Cowden's blog here, got some sort of longer titles there. The last one there, obviously, you're calling for contributions to continents or so forth. And so that one's quite a long one there as well. But basically, think about your title and how far towards descriptive and catchy that you want it to be. So yeah, just summarising those points really. One of the other things you might want to do is identify what your likely readers are going to be interested in. So not just what you're interested in and how you want to sort of frame the topic, but how your readers might be coming to that topic as well. Another thing you could do is ask a question. So questions can be sometimes good, or state something slightly controversial and then go into that in the blog post. Obviously you need to be ready sort of for that kind of post if you're going to do that. The other thing you can include in titles are keywords, so words that will get people sort of noticed. So if this is a history topic, maybe include history in it in some form, or philosophy, or whatever subject you're doing, but try to include some kind of keyword there. That would be great for sort of Google searches and so forth, as well as catching the eye of people that might be interested in the topic. And wherever possible, keep it short, or at least relatively short. After the title, I'd say the opening line is probably the next best thing it's the next thing that readers are likely to read. If they see the title and they're vaguely interested, they'll probably look at least at the first line, and they might not go any further, potentially. So first impressions obviously matter. So try to hook the reader with the first line. Doesn't necessarily need to be descriptive, but it needs to be catching. It needs to give sort of the reader some idea of what they're going to get in the rest of the post. So here's some examples of blog posts. The post summarised some of the arguments I made at this December's Society of Culture and Belief seminar. So it's very descriptive, not necessarily catchy, but at least it tells you exactly what this post is going to be about. Squeezed between the centenaries of the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand and Duchess Sophie, and so forth. So not a bit more straight into the post, but it's giving you an idea of what the topic is going to be and how it's going to read out. And the last one here is more from the commercial sector. What's it like to be a junior analyst on Wall Street making 70,000 a year in your early 20s? That's there largely just to sort of say, that's how it's sort of done in the kind of commercial world. And it's straight away, it's asking you a question which might, interest you. If you want to make 70,000 a year, it doesn't. But so it's worth considering the first line is basically what I'm saying there. Okay, and finally on that bit, what's the point? So you need to have a reason for your post, really. Consider just spend a few sort of minutes just thinking, what am I trying to achieve with this blog post? Is it just about getting a piece of information out there? Are you advertising an event or a project, or wanting to lead the reader on something else? So just consider those sort of thoughts, and how you're going to structure your blog post will matter, considering on what you're trying to achieve with it. Okay, call to action. So a good post ends by asking the reader to do something. So as I was saying, you want to get your reader to read the blog post if possible, but also you do want to lead them to other content that is of interest. So you're trying to get them more involved in it. Now this might be something that relates to your own sort of department or your own interests. So it might be a link to sort of the website of the institution. It might be to the events page if it's about an event of some kind, or whatever it is, or it might be something completely outside of your interests in a way, but sort of connected to the post where you just want to lead people on for more information. So put some kind of link down near the bottom of the post. Facebook or Twitter, put your handle there if you've got any of those sort of things. Try and sort of basically get people to sort of continue reading or go through. Even do to another blog post in the same blog if that's relevant. So it's just a way to sort of draw people in a bit more. Obviously check for errors or spelling or grammar mistakes wherever possible. So just do a read through of your post before it goes live if possible. And another little item is, which I've just noticed after saying avoid errors, I've got number 3 there after number 6, so I'm doing well already. But timing of publication. So this is something that you may or may not want to consider, but certain readers will sort of subscribe to your blog potentially and will want to see it at a specific time, or when you tweet about it, it'll be at a certain time. So consider when it's best to post it. Is it best to post it on Monday or Friday, or weekend? What sort of time? Sort of, do you want it in the morning, the afternoon, evening? Is it for UK audience, in which case sort of working day possibly is sort of best time, or are you going into for a US audience or somewhere else in the world, in which case you need to take into account they're getting up at different times of the day. So choose the right kind of moment. And you can schedule a blog post easily, so you can sort of schedule it for the next day or week and have that ready to go. You can even schedule sort of tweets about it and so forth if you want to advertise it further. But yeah, if you want to try to get promoted your blog post, that's one thing that can be quite useful, is just getting it out to the right moment. If you're sort of posting it in the middle of the night somewhere, it's less likely to build up traction, at least straight away, because of that. And yeah, as I say, talk about it elsewhere, so social media, get it on your website if possible, depending on what you're trying to achieve, but try to get some kind of promotion of it. Even just one tweet, and if you've got some followers, might actually make a difference. You might actually get people viewing it. A long time ago, I set up a blog, which basically kept posting to nothing. Nobody really much ever came to it. So 1 or 2 people per month, if you're lucky. As soon as I started that, sort of doing something on Twitter with it, I started getting quite a few more people coming through, and it actually began to not take off necessarily, but at least it got a following at that stage. So Twitter really did help. And to begin with, all I did was actually set up so it was an automatic tweet onto my account. So automatically, whenever I sent a post came out, an automatic tweet went out, and that made a big difference. When I started talking about it a bit more manually myself, then that made even more of a difference. So Twitter and things like that do really actually help, especially in the early days of a blog. People can't find blogs very easily unless you actually tell them about it in the first place. Okay, now we're going to what's depressing in some ways of statistics. There's a statistic out there that says roughly on average a visitor to a blog spends about 90 seconds on a page. That's if you're lucky anyway. That's not enough for perhaps reading 500 words, perhaps 1,000 if they're really skim reading it. Most people might really skim read, and you're looking at a lot less than 90 seconds. On the other hand, search engines, so like Google and so forth, they look at roughly 250 to 1,000 word long articles as an average length, and so they will actually pick up better on the search engines if they're around about that kind of level. Anything shorter, they kind of get missed a bit. If it's too long, then again, they're sort of lower down the line. So it's worth considering that in figuring out how long you want the post to be, and the fact that most readers are not going to read a full-length essay. Most likely, they will skim read it. Even if you've got something long, they will skim. It's quite here. The length of the post depends on what it is you're talking about and how many words are therefore needed. So, as a kind of an aside to that, it is your post. You need to decide how long it needs to be as well to get the topic out there. And just to completely contradict myself, there are those who do it much longer. Adam Curtis, BBC journalist, writes about 5,000 words. Andrew Prescott, about 1,000, 2,000 words. And they get quite a few people reading their posts. Admittedly, they're sort of high profile in their own disciplines and interests, but they're quite successful in that, so it can vary. But most of the time, you're probably looking at a lot shorter, and that will be optimal. So how do you make it scannable? How do you make it easy for people to actually read your post? One thing you can do is include a list somewhere within the post just to break up the text. If you're reading just text, it gets a bit monotonous, especially online. So bullet points are quite good, numbered lists and so forth. So here's an example. Just this one, some kind of a workshop or conference and so forth, listing out the sort of different disciplines that are interesting there. Formatting as well. So if you want to highlight something, a sort of particular word, use bold or capitals, italics. Capitals can be sort of like shouting to somebody, so you probably, that's one to use a lot less. But bold and underlining, italics and so forth, that can be really quite effective. Also you can change colour, style of font and so forth, but again, you don't want it to be too confusing. So here's an example of just emphasising the date and the events on, so it makes it a lot clearer. That's the bit you want to highlight, and somebody that skim reads it will see the title. Okay, it's about Bloomsbury Festival in 2013, runs 15th, 20th of October. They've got a clear understanding of that within about a second or two. Headings and subheadings. So within the actual text itself of the post, you can include subheadings, basically, sort of large, bold words that just adds this visual cue. So you can actually almost tell your entire story of your blog post through subheadings if you're careful with it. And so somebody could actually just read your subheadings and get a fairly good idea what it is you're trying to say. And then from there, hopefully they will actually read a bit more of the actual content. But it's also another way of breaking up the content nicely, so it looks slightly more digestible, less sort of long. So here's a brief example from the SAS blog, just using some titles there. And it does just sort of help break up the text a bit. Again, as you saw on that one, and I'll be showing it again, pictures are also really, really handy. Or video, either of these things. It's just a visual cue can be really useful. It can brighten something up, make it look more interesting, a bit more magazine feel, and that doesn't necessarily lose any of the content and so forth. And it doesn't necessarily have to be vital to the post itself. It could just be something that's vaguely illustrative or connected, just something to make it look prettier. On the other hand, if you can actually embed it into what you're actually talking about and make it actually properly connected, that's even better, because people will actually then spend time looking at the image and paying attention to it. So it very much depends on what you're writing about, but images are almost always good to actually have on a blog post. It's probably very rare that you don't want to have an image there. And quotes can be useful sometimes for breaking it up. So again, changing the font, making it bold, different colour and so forth can be handy as well. But if you have quotes in there, again, it's breaking up the text, it's making it a bit more legible. Maybe somebody will read the quote when they're not necessarily reading the text straight away, and then get into the post from there. So here's an example of how a quote can assist to filling of this particular blog. So you wouldn't always get like this, but it just gives you something slightly different that you can look at. Maybe gives you an idea of what the blog post is about without actually getting into the main content of it. Okay, this is something I came across a couple of years ago, which is what journalists use to write their articles, or one of the things they use, the inverted pyramid, and it can be quite a good way to actually write blog posts. So what this basically is if you imagine an academic article, you usually start off your introduction, then the main body of it with all your research and evidence in, then a conclusion. This is what you're actually sort of deciding is the reality here. What this is swapping that around. So you actually have your conclusion first, you're saying what exactly it is you discovered or found. Then you give your evidence in the same sort of way. And then at the end, you kind of end with, it's not really an introduction, but you end with sort of leading them on somewhere else. Some interesting related points and so forth. But it's almost just talking around what you'd almost instinctively do and what you've probably been taught to do. And that can actually be quite a good way to grab attention. If you're imagining people are coming to your post, the first paragraph, the first line, but the first paragraph is where they're going to be paying most attention most likely. So if you get your most important points out to the way there, then hopefully they'll read through and find out sort of how you back that up and so forth, rather than leaving it at the end where people might not actually get to in the first place. And this is all just about drawing people into your content. If they're interested, hopefully they'll read it anyway, but it's just a way to sort of increase the likelihood of that. Okay, I'm going to end my sort of talk bit on Adam Curtis again. Not because I'm a massive fan of him or anything really, just that he's got a quite unique way of writing blog posts, which is more of a documentary basically. But yeah, basically what he does with the blog posts is he has his massive sort of 5,000 odd words. They include images and videos and actually links it all together. So when you're reading it, it's almost like watching a documentary. So you've got your introduction bit here, so you have a sort of opening sequence. And he's got his introduction, an image, a little bit more brief description of that, another image, more going into more detail, image. Eventually, here we've got a video.
And the conclusion I came to is this.
Yeah, so, as you see, it's quite a short video. I think some are longer, some are shorter, but they'll always be sort of 3 to 5 minutes around the sort of average. And then you've got a longer bit here and so forth. And as you see, it does go on. And chances are, only some of the people who are reading that will actually read all of it, but they're more likely to read it and look at some of it because he's got a bit more interest to it, there's a bit more to it than just a load of text. If you're just reading the text, you probably would get bored after the first paragraph or so unless you're really into the subject. But by having some other sort of media there, he's really sort of lighting it up. I believe that is largely all I have to say on the matter. So.